Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalatu wassalamu ala Muhammadin wa alihi tayyibin at-tahirin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilman. So, assalamu alaikum everyone. Today's reflection is about receiving correction, which is the other half of the equation of giving feedback well with wisdom, as we spoke about yesterday, right? And the verse we're going to be reflecting on today is verse 18 from chapter 39. So, as we continue reflecting on feedback and correction, we often focus on the courage required to give feedback. We talk about speaking truth gently, correcting with wisdom, and intervening with love. But there is the other side to this equation, and one that may be tougher for many of us, and that is receiving the feedback, receiving correction. Now, it's very easy to say that we value growth, right? It's much harder to demonstrate it when someone points out where we are falling short. That is when the ego really kicks in, and boy, does it sting. Do we remember the hadith that says, the believer is the mirror of the believer? Now, have we considered what a mirror does? A mirror does not flatter. Though, believe me, as we get older, we really wish that it did. It does not soften angles. It just does not adjust lighting. It simply reflects what is there. And we may not always like what we see, but in a situation like this, the mirror is a gift. As we grow older and more accomplished and more established in our families and communities and careers, something very subtle happens. We begin to receive less honest feedback. Why? Because it's easier to correct a young person than an older one, right? It's easier to advise a junior colleague than a senior leader. People become hesitant. They worry about offending. They tell themselves it's not my place, right? So, ironically, those who most need honest mirrors often have the fewest around them. This is why it's not uncommon for successful professionals to hire coaches simply to hear what those closest to them are too polite or too intimidated to say. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I certainly have, right? I remember as a young mom, when I used to go to the mosque, all the aunties used to feel free to tell me what I was doing wrong and how I could do better. And honestly, that was a gift because I remember so many things that were corrected because without those people, they wouldn't have been corrected. I would have continued to do things in a way that was not completely accurate, for example, right? So Imam Ali alayhi salam has said that the most beloved of your brothers is the one who points out your flaws to you. And this statements, reflects some extraordinary spiritual maturity. It assumes that purification, that self-growth matters more than pride. That self-development, achieving our full potential matters more than comfort, more than our ego, and that salvation matters more than image, right? And the Quran praises this very quality in Surah Zumar when it says, those who listen to the word and then follow the best of it, those are they whom Allah has guided, and those it is who are the men of understanding, the ulul albab, which is a very high status of understanding. Now, for our reflection here, this can mean something very practical. Listening carefully, even when feedback stings, and extracting the truth rather than reacting to the tone. Spiritual literature consistently emphasizes this capacity, right? A living conscience is one that welcomes correction, even when it arrives wrapped imperfectly. Some of the righteous would pray, oh Allah, show me my faults, right? Understanding that blind spots are more dangerous than visible weaknesses. Now, psychologically, this requires emotional regulation, right? When someone corrects us, the nervous system often reacts first. We feel exposed, misunderstood, unappreciated. The ego flares up quickly in this situation. They don't understand me. That's not fair. They're exaggerating. Who are they to say this? They should mind their own business. What about them? They do things too, etc., right? So, how about pausing before the defensiveness takes over and simply asking, what part of this might be useful? What blind spot might Allah be revealing through this person? Can I separate my ego from this information? And even if the delivery was imperfect, is there a kernel of truth here? Now, modern psychology calls this non-defensive listening. And spiritual tradition is, we know, it's just humility, right? And humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is caring more about your soul than your status. Now, receiving correction with grace transforms community culture. It signals that growth is valued over image, and it makes it safer for others to speak honestly. It creates a culture of safety where the believers can be the awliya of each other, like we said yesterday or day before. It reduces hypocrisy, increases sincerity, and especially when leaders receive advice well, communities become healthier. When parents, who are the leaders in their family, they receive feedback from children with openness, relationships deepen for sure. When spouses can jointly point out things without triggering defensiveness, marriages grow. The opposite culture is fragile. It is built on ego, and in such environments, people whisper instead of speaking. They'll talk to others about it, but not to you. And this is how problems fester and harm normalizes because no one feels safe naming it. Of course, what I am not saying and what this does not mean is that we have to accept every criticism uncritically. Because sometimes the criticism is uncalled for, it is too much. So I'm not talking about how it's delivered, but the content of the criticism or the feedback, right? It means we simply need to be discerning without being defensive. We need to fully consider it. We need to fully consider what is being said. It means filtering, through revelation, through wisdom, through self-awareness. It means recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes send guidance through unexpected mouths. So how do we do this? How do we receive feedback with grace? So here are kind of 4 steps or 4, principles to keep in mind. First one is to pause before you protect. Because our first reaction, our instinctive reaction to correction is ego protection, right? Defensiveness. The heart tightens, the mind prepares for defense. And when that happens, pause, take a breath, regulate your nervous system before responding, right? Take a breath again, lower your voice, do not interrupt. Psychological research shows that defensiveness blocks learning. We're not able to hear the other person. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, the most beloved of my brothers to me is he who confers, in other words, gifts my faults to me. So, what he's saying and what we should remind ourselves is that we are being given the gift of correction. It is actually a gift because it allows us to change course, right? Secondly, to separate tone from truth. So not all advice is delivered perfectly. We know that. Sometimes it comes clumsily, sometimes emotionally, sometimes at the wrong time. Following the best of it means extracting what is useful, even if the delivery was imperfect, right? Instead of focusing on the lack of elegance in the delivery, we can see it as another AGO. Remember, one of my favorite things, AGO, another growth opportunity. So ask ourselves, is there even 10% of truth here? And what might Allah be showing me through this discomfort? Because when we get defensive, chances are that it is triggering something which is recognizing truth within us, right? Number 3, think before you analyze. Even if you need time to process it, that's fine. You need to consider it, you need to evaluate it. But in the first instance, you can respond with gratitude. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate your honesty. I'll reflect on that, right? What this does is, first of all, gratitude lowers the ego. It also builds a culture where truth telling, where giving guidance is safe. A warning about your blind spot is a mercy, right? Before it becomes a consequence. Uh, That's why we are told whoever admonishes you to act righteously has done you a favor. Fourth, reflect privately before responding publicly. So do not rush to justify yourself. Sit with it, right? Consider it, think about it, um, and ask yourself, is this a pattern? Have I heard this before? Chances are, especially with our spouses, our close friends, our children, they're trying to tell us things that we have heard before, that others have tried to tell us, that we have become defensive about, right? And is my resistance to this information, is it about truth or is it about pride? And so we've all heard, right, that the scholars of Tazkiyah often recommend muhasaba, right, which is self-accounting, especially before we sleep, which is reviewing one's actions and interactions honestly. And we know the hadith that says, take account of yourselves before you are taken account of, right? So receiving feedback well is applied muhasaba, that somebody is actually helping us do it. So in short, when we receive feedback with grace, relationships deepen and guidance flows more freely. Guidance flows more freely. When we react defensively instead, people stop guiding us. Problems go underground and harm festers beneath the surface. So we know Ramadan is a month of purification, right? We're fasting from food and drink. Perhaps we can also practice fasting from defensiveness, fasting from the need to always be right, fasting from protecting our image at the expense of our growth. So lots to think about for me especially, and inshallah we can help each other along. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.